Veteran bankers will remember a time when the compliance department was viewed as something of an irritation, and its pronouncements treated more as recommendations than as diktats. Those days are emphatically over. Bank regulators now expect compliance capability to operate as a core control function embedded across the business. It is no longer a narrow, advisory, or box-ticking department. The global financial crisis was a key event that catapulted compliance to the top of the banking agenda. This trend was accelerated by numerous conduct scandals, cyber threats, operational disruptions, and more recently, AI adoption. The consequence is that expectations of supervisor have become broader, more searching, and much more outcome-focused. Compliance demands a risk-based approach. A major regulatory expectation is that compliance capability must be risk-based. No longer do regulators accept vague and generic compliance frameworks that effectively treat all risks equally. Instead, firms are expected to identify, assess, and prioritize the areas where customer harm, misconduct, regulatory breaches, or financial crimes risks are greatest. The corollary is that compliance resources should be allocated according to the likelihood and severity of risk. Hence, high-risk products, vulnerable customers, complex distribution channels, outsourcing arrangements, or areas that are subject to a rapidly changing regulatory environment need to receive greater scrutiny and monitoring. Supervisors increasingly expect firms to demonstrate how risk assessments influence their compliance plans, testing programs, monitoring intensity, and escalation procedures. Compliance function must be embedded. The compliance department used to operate somewhat in isolation from various business units, risk management, operations, technology, or internal audit. Regulators no longer tolerate this silo approach and insist the compliance capability be firm-wide. Compliance failures often rise from fragmented information flows and weak communication and coordination across functions. For these reasons, compliance should be integrated into product design, customer communications, operational processes, outsourcing procedures, digital transformation projects, and strategic decision-making. Arising from that, senior management and boards should receive clear reporting on compliance risks organization-wide rather than fragmented reports from separate departments. Data key to effective compliance. Compliance needs to harness data to maximum effect. Regulators expect firms to use data analytics, management information, automated monitoring tools, and real-time indicators to identify emerging risks and compliance failures. Supervisors expect firms to apply structured data analysis in order to monitor trends such as customer complaints, transaction anomalies, staff conduct indicators, fraud patterns, vulnerable customer outcomes, and operational incidents. No longer are compliance frameworks couched within annual exercises centered on periodic policy reviews and mandatory training refreshers. Instead, regulators expect compliance capability to be continuously updated rather than static. This reflects the fact that regulatory requirements, financial crime threats, cyber risks, digital products, and customer expectations evolve continuously. Compliance is therefore a function that must adapt dynamically. Compliance function demands evidence and outcomes. The mere existence of policies and procedures is insufficient. Compliance programs are expected to be effective and demonstrably so. Regulators are placing far greater emphasis on evidence and outcomes, and firms are expected to prove that their controls not only exist, but actually work in practice. This involves structure testing, monitoring, root cause analysis, remediation tracking, and clear management reporting. Management accountability has become a major focus area in recent years. In the past, compliance failures were routinely attributed to isolated staff actions. Today, regulators expect senior executives and boards to take ownership of compliance culture and regulatory risk. This accountability is now placed explicitly on named individuals. Boards are expected to challenge management effectively, understand compliance risks, and ensure adequate resources are allocated to control functions, personal accountability, and compliance. Greater personal accountability implies more attention on escalation frameworks and internal communication. Delayed escalation has featured in many enforcement cases. There should be a culture where employees are free to raise concerns without fear of retaliation and where red flags are not suppressed for commercial reasons. Independent compliance monitoring is another key expectation. Regulators increasingly distinguish between first-line operational controls and second-line compliance oversight. Compliance must challenge the business rather than acting as passive advisors. Regulators are on their guard where compliance functions lack sufficient authority, independence, or stature within institutions. None of this is possible without adequate staffing, appropriate technical skills, and sufficient access to systems and data. Regulators, therefore, scrutinize levels of compliance resources, technology, and expertise. Likewise, training expectations have risen sharply. It is no longer acceptable merely to provide annual generic compliance modules. Training must be targeted, role-specific, and risk-based, and tailored to employees' actual responsibilities.